This is 23:30 GMT on Wednesday, the 19th of August 2020. This is still being recorded as part of the test phase of the Kudila television channel, which means that we are not yet broadcasting a scheduled series of items daily, which we shall be doing. But the contents of what is recorded here in the video are as valid as if they were part of the officially launched series of daily broadcasts. So the contents are covered by all the legal claims of authorship, publishing rights, and any citation or reference to any contents, whether in full or in part, will have to be done by expressly acknowledging the source, which is the Kudila television, and the authorship and publishing and writing rights belong to Muhammad Haq, that is myself. And the lack of specific exact time difference between two broadcasts is a function of the many logistical things we have to be doing as part of the ongoing campaigns that we are part of and we are pursuing. And that is the Kudila campaign's characteristics. And today we shall be talking about, of course, the rest of the Fleet Street papers that we didn't talk about in the previous two parts of this diagnosis of Fleet Street. This one is about the Guardian and the report on pages 16 and 17 of the Guardian of Wednesday, the 19th of August 2020. Its headline says, reports of rough sleeping rose over lockdown despite hotel scheme. And there is a case story about Zion Walsh and his late partner Melvin Guanzuru, with whom he had been living in their dream home. Walsh is now struggling to continue to pay the rent alone. As page 17, and it's written by Diane Tyler. And the one about reports of rough sleeping rose over lockdown despite hotel scheme is written by Sarah Marsh and Nia McIntyre. So we shall be talking about the evictions, and we shall be talking about other issues to do with the racist discrimination faced by elderly Black people, that is Asians, Africans, and other people not classified as European white in that sense. So there will be a discussion on that. And also, of course, in Greater Manchester, there is a preparation for the lockdown to be put in Oldham, and there is resistance from Oldham Council's leader to that plan. And compared to Oldham, the latest local council area that had the local lockdown imposed was Leicester. This report says that the Leicester infection rate is coming down. Okay, so on page 18 of the Guardian of the Wednesday, 19th of August 2020, there is a headline which says, BAME people over 50 face entrenched inequalities, report finds. That is Jamie Grierson, Home Affairs correspondent. It says ethnic inequalities are deeply entrenched among over 50s in England, with older Black, Asian, and minority ethnic people falling behind white persons, peers, on income and home ownership, new research shows. And the new research is by the Center for Aging Better, the Institute for Public Policy Research, and University College London. That is what is revealing. Now, that is a fact that doesn't need any research. The fact is experienced daily at every stage, every level. So it is not done by institutional prejudice or racism. It is individuals discriminating against African people, Asian people, and they are saying this one aged over 50. But it really doesn't make a significant difference, whatever the age of the victim or the target of the racist discrimination is. One of the original findings of our investigation daily is that the reason why people of African and Asian, and in the case of the Windrush generation from the Caribbean, prefer to live together in particular areas is directly linked with the impossibility of living in any basic, decent human freedom in areas of mixed ethnic background people, because there are always hostility and have been hostility and the secondary look. That is why people have found that it is better compared to living in mixed areas in significant numbers. It is better to live in areas where there are significant numbers of people from the same or similar backgrounds. That is the case. That has been the case for decades, 60 years, 70 years in Britain. And before the 70 years, before the end of the so-called Second World War, the numbers of people from African background and Asian backgrounds in the cities were comparatively smaller. So therefore, the actual presence of people in particular areas could not be measured in any significant way. Now, these reports of BAME people are also coming in the wake of the campaign against racist murders, as epitomized in the murder by strangulation by the police of the black man in America, and giving an extra boost, unprecedented boost to the Black Lives Matter campaign. On the same page of The Guardian of the 18th of August 2020 is the case of Inspector Charles Ehi Kiyoya. Inspector Charles Ehi Kiyoya, who is an inspector in the Metropolitan Police. He appears to be still in service. And it's written by Vikram Dodd, a police and crime correspondent. The race crisis in policing continued yesterday with a claim that a senior black police officer had been racially profiled when two Met officers stopped him in his car. Inspector Charles Ehi Kiyoya accuses the Metropolitan Police of not taking his complaint about the stop seriously enough. Now, this is again not news. There is no record, there is no evidence that complaints to the Metropolitan Police about any aspect of policing is treated in the way that the merits and the experience of the complainants have warranted. And this is the failure of the police only in part. It's the failure of the political system and the failure of both parties, both major parties, the Conservatives and the Labour Party. So this again exposes the myth of Jeremy Corbyn being the radical leader of the Labour Party. Because in the 5 years that he was in post, he didn't make any case about the absence of accountability by the institutions or the agencies on racist behavior that are frequently encountered by African and Asian people in those agencies or from those agencies or from personnel from those agencies. And this includes the police, of course, in this case, the police, and it includes the court system, the legal bureaucracy, the so-called licensors of the licenses for legal practice, like the Law Society, the Solicitors Regulation Authority, the Bar Council, the Barristers Bar Standards Board, and the 4 inns of courts: Lincoln's Inn, INN, Gray's Inn, Middle Temple, and the other inn. Gray's Inn, Lincoln's Inn, Middle Temple, and what is the other one? The 4th one we shall be adding later. The point is, these inns have been run for centuries. These 4 inns where barristers get pupillage and kind of permission, the license to practice as lawyers, as barristers. Until very recently, the inns didn't have any formal education qualification required. It was just the what is called the dinner. There was a bureaucratic ritual that the would-be barrister had to undergo, become member of the inn, and then that is it. I was just narrowly denied that license in 1973. I have discussed this previously, but I will discuss another time. Essentially what it was a group of barristers who had promised to give me the pupillage and the recommendation and all the rest of it, did that, but then something happened in the communication, and the inns, Lincoln's Inns, then administrator, a woman called Barbara Bates, she lied and she refused to acknowledge the actual endorsement and the support and the recommendations for me that several practicing barristers had already given, according to their statements to me. And it shows whatever Barbara Bates did to prevent me from getting a license, the fact is that the system was based on no extra special educational qualification. Although I had my qualifications separately from the Lincoln's Inn requirements, but it wasn't geared to the giving of the license, or the calling to the bar, as it was called or is called, was not connected with any particular educational qualification. Now the point is that these, like Barbara Bates' behavior, she lied, and she would not have lied had I been white. And that is the evidence that I can actually cite forever, because that is what happened. Because she said that she said something completely racist and corrupt and stupid and untenable. She said that my standard of my English was not up to scratch or up to the standard required. Now, my standard of my English has been always above the level any barrister can be expected to have. And she was saying that. And the reason why she was saying that individually was because there was no way of challenging her. The existing court bureaucracy would not allow me to have a successful application to overturn her obstruction and her lying and to penalize them and to get my particular license to practice as a barrister. Quite apart from the fact that I had been advocating legal rights for many, many years before that, and I have been doing this since then. So the claim that there is institutional racism is made by ignorant people who don't know the facts of the operation of individual racism at every stage, every day in this country, causing African and Asian people and other people to be deprived of basic human rights and equal rights. Wednesday, in terms of the GMT, it is still 15 minutes before the end of Wednesday, GMT time in Britain. The 19th of August, that is, has been observed by the United Nations as the United Nations Humanitarian Day. This is something that has been, this kind of day and the observance of a day has been put into kind of almost daily use by the current Secretary General, Anthony Guterres. Now, Guterres, we have said about his role in congratulating Narendra Modi of India, very near to the time when the Burmese were committing genocide against the Muslim Rohingyas. And Modi was a supporter and still remains a supporter of the persecution of the Rohingya Muslims, not only inside of Burma, but also across India, where thousands of Rohingya Muslims had to seek shelter. And India is very much on the one part of the Burmese border, and they have been treated with hostility and persecution under the Brahminist BJP regime fronted by Narendra Modi. And that Narendra Modi also went to Burma and congratulated the regime front, that is Aung San Suu Kyi, for her genocidist policies. So the United Nations man, Antonio Guterres, observing the Humanitarian Day on 19th of August 2020, must not be allowed to forget the role he has been playing in colluding with supporters and backers and promoters of genocide. And that is an absolutely outrageous contrast for Anthony Guterres to indulge in observing Humanitarian Day when the millions of people, victims of genocide, including the Rohingya Muslims, remain in the states of denial and loss of their statehood and nationhood. And there is no action against the genocides by the United Nations, no actions to speak of. And there are reports today during the Wednesday, the 19th of August, the United Nations High Commission for Refugees has actually issued a statement seriously jeopardizing the claim of the majority of people seeking refuges in the West and in other countries. And it says that 70% of the applicants or people seeking refuges are not eligible for refugee status. So the United Nations, like the BBC in Britain, has become now part of the oppressors and part of the liars And this is a very severe reversal of the founding of the United Nations. And Guterres is doing this, and it is his watch under which this denial of the rights of the refugees is being promoted and peddled in collusion with the racist attacks on the rights of refugees fleeing various parts, including in the case of the channel between France and England, the dangerous channel where a 16-year-old boy, a Somali boy, was found to have drowned on Tuesday. That is the reality. And the United Nations is now complicit with the regime in Britain that is hostile to the point of declaring war against the refugees trying to cross the channel. And so, therefore, what we are doing here in this campaign is to continue the legal challenge against the British Home Office, the British government, and now the United Nations Human Rights Commission, Refugee Commission or Humanitarian Commission, whatever they call themselves, for violating the United Nations founding charters and declarations and the resulting treaties, including the 1951 Refugee Convention and its demands and its requirements. And there is this tendency on the part of the likes of The Guardian that by running stories about racism in the police, they are actually telling the truth. They are not. Because this Bikram Dodd piece on page 18 of The Guardian of the 19th of August about the black inspector stopped by Metropolitan Police officers, it reads the race crisis. It doesn't say racism. So the Bikram Dodd, who is an Indian or of Indian origin, Bikram Dodd and The Guardian, which is supposed to be apparently less racist than the Daily Mail and less racist than the Sun, so they are actually refusing to treat the behavior of the particular individuals using or abusing the Metropolitan Police positions to stop and intimidate and harass this black man who is himself a police employee, police inspector. That shows the role of The Guardian as pro-racist. And The Guardian has been pro-racist despite the fact that it has been peddled by other careerists in the decades as being the liberal paper. It has not been. And the constitution of The Guardian, that is to say the makeup, the composition of The Guardian editorially and its role and its personnel, the employment profile, remains very much based on absolutely white middle class bourgeois kind of background people. And there is hardly any real diversity in terms of the editorial content and the independence of reporting. And there is no presence of independent, intelligent African or Asian people writing in The Guardian. And this despite the fact that The Guardian's editor has become, the first editor of The Guardian is a gender-based, it's a woman. It has made no difference in ending The Guardian's racist orientation and policies and practices. And the contents are increasingly veering to the right of already a right-wing kind of tendency. So the Harry Dunn, the young person who was murdered in a traffic so-called accident by a US citizen who was later described as a CIA operative called Anne Sakulas 42. So this is the actual covering on the Daily Mirror of Wednesday, the 19th of August 2020. And that is not about the migrants. And we shall see what they say of the migrants on the paper of Thursday. And there is nothing to do with the examination robbery of the grades. This is the television license fee row between the BBC and the government. And on the pages 4 and 5, it's about Harry Dunn and the grief of his mother. And on page 6 and 7, they're talking about the scrapping of Public Health England and the hiring of a proven conservative incompetent called Dido Harding as the head of the new, replacing the Public Health England outfit. And there is no evidence that the Daily Mirror is talking about the racist behavior from or inside or via the Metropolitan Police in London or from the other institutions. And there is no evidence that the Daily Mirror is bothered about the racism that dominates and festers in the legal system, so-called, and in the academic institutions. And the daily morning scar of the Communist Party is having a slogan that is not worth going into details because it is completely empty slogan and it doesn't say anything about accountability. And the Guardian and the Daily Mirror and the Morning Star are the three titles among the London-based front pages or the Fleet Street. The Morning Star is not part of Fleet Street, but the daily papers based in London. These are the three that are supposed to be covering some sort of anti-right-wing kind of line, following the anti-right-wing line, that is to say, some kind of accountability, some kind of democracy. But even they lack substance on every aspect. So where is the solution? The solution is not visible. It's not available from the behavior, the statements, the policies of Keir Starmer, who actually was given a prominent column on Tuesday in the Daily Mirror, which mildly said that Boris Johnson's way of governing was no way to run the country. He wasn't talking about mass murders. He was not talking about racism. And he most certainly was not concerned about the threat against the safety, literally, safety of the people desperate to cross the channel to seek refuge in this country. One of the statements issued during Wednesday by a French minister after the Sudanese boy's body was found was that this was the result, or this was one of the results of the British government refusing to allow asylum applications to be processed in France so that the desperate journey would be avoided. And there is nothing in the papers talking about that contributory factor to avoidable deaths of children like this 16-year-old asylum seeker. So the United Nations is failing, it's colluding with the British racist regime. The papers are empty, and the court system is unreliable, and absolutely nowhere will the court system deliver justice for the victims of denial of asylum. So we are having to organize the campaign in a way that will compel the admission by the court system of its duties to look at the violations. We shall be continuing in the next edition.